I really want to thank Manuel. He's put a sound guy on the stage in one of the world's greatest concert halls. How happy am I? Fantastic. What a building. I'd like to invite you for the next few minutes to listen, but in a different way perhaps to the way that you're used to listening. My slide didn't advance. Now it has, thank you. We have 4 modes of communication. And if you ask people in research, almost everybody will say the most important of those 4 modes is, in fact, listening. There are 2 outputs, 2 inputs, 2 to do with the spoken word, 2 to do with the written word. But listening is what people always say is the most important one. So let's take a look at listening and just look at how much time we spend. Of that communication time that we spend, roughly 60%, depending on what you do and how much you're involved in listening in your job, but up to 60% of that time is spent listening. And yet, our listening comprehension is just 25%. In other words, 3/4 of what I'm saying to you will just go out of the room. Sadly, I'll do my best, but this is true all the time. In our spoken conversation, we lose 3 words out of 4. We're not very good at it, are we? Could be a problem. I'd like to ask you to consider what actually is listening. You may not have thought of this before. It's obvious, isn't it? It's like with seeing, there's looking. It's an active form of the sense. With hearing, there's listening. But what is it? How would you define it? I'd like to offer a definition to you, and it's a very broad definition, but I think it's a good one. Listening is making meaning from sound. That's all the sound that surrounds us all the time, not just conversation. And if that's what listening is, behind that there's a fairly significant process. It's a process that's got 3 stages. The first stage is a physical stage. Sound waves hit your eardrum. That's deep inside your head. This is very intimate. It's physical. Sound touches you right inside your head. Also, incidentally, your whole body is listening. So sound vibration is touching you all over. The second phase is that those physical contacts are turned into electrochemical activity, which results in neurons firing off in your brain. Now, those 2 stages really, I would say, are more about hearing than about listening. The 3rd stage is where the listening really happens. And that 3rd stage is mental. Now, if you think that there's not much mental activity, you're just listening to what's going on, let me show you a long list of the things that we do in our minds to listen. There are 3 classes. First of all, there's pattern recognition. This is a very important trick that our minds use in order to listen to the world. There's a well-known effect called the cocktail party effect. So if I'm talking to you in a party where there's noise like this going on in the background, it's quite hard to listen to the sound source. And actually, that gets harder as you get older. I don't like parties like that anymore because I find it really hard to hear what people are saying without doing this and looking like a very old person. The second trick that we use in order to extract information is differencing. This sound is pink noise. And if I were to play this noise at a slightly lower level for 5 or 6 minutes, you would actually cease to hear it. Your brain would just say, okay, I know what that's doing, I'm not listening to that anymore. They play it in offices as masking sound, and people just cease to hear it altogether, unless you turn it off. And the 3rd and very important aspect of the mental process of listening is filters. There are a long list of filters that we employ, and they start with your culture. And we heard a little bit of wonderful Portuguese culture and the sound that people are making earlier on. But right from your culture, for example, I don't know if any of you know any Finns. The Finns have a different attitude to silence to any other nation I know. They love it. Their idea of a good time is to go around to somebody's house, sit for 3 hours in silence, and go home. I love the Finns because they do really relish that peace and that silence. Language itself is a huge filter for what we can listen to. In some sub-Saharan languages, they're tonal, so it's just the tone of voice, which indicates positive, negative, even past and future are indicated just by tone of voice. So there's a long list of the filters, your values, your attitudes, your beliefs, your expectations going into a situation very often determine what you hear, what you listen to, and what you don't. And intention, so important with sound. And if you think that you can't change sound with your mind, I want to give you a demonstration of something called a cross-modal effect. So I want you to look at the guy on the screen very carefully and then tell me what he's saying.
Ba, 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 ba. Ba, ba,
Da, da,
ba,
yes?
ba, ba, ba.
Close your eyes.
Ba, 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 ba.
You can try it again. Open your eyes.
Ba, 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 ba.
You can't override that. Your eyes are changing what you hear. That's an effect called the McGurk Effect, and thanks very much to Professor Arndt Masso for that excellent demonstration of it. It's a well-known audio illusion, and sound affects your taste as well. There are lots of things happening all the time between senses. This is an experiment done by Charles Spence at Oxford University, where they boosted the frequency 5 kilohertz in a pair of headphones to people eating crisps, and the response was, people said the crisps were actually crunchier in their mouth because the frequency had been boosted. So the senses are affecting each other all the time, but we have a problem. The problem is we don't listen. I'm really absolutely with Ernest Hemingway in this one. Most of us never listen. We get by just barely conscious of the sound around us. And there are reasons for this. We invented writing some thousands of years ago, and now the premium on listening is not so great. And if you want to go to sleep now, you can watch this talk on the TEDx YouTube channel later. So we don't have to be so present. In the old days, if you missed it, you missed it. But secondly, I think there's a cultural thing going on. You may be familiar with the Chinese duality of yin and yang. Yin being female, receiving, dark, moon, lots of those kinds of words. Yang being male, much more about sending, light and heat and so forth. If I substitute audio words for those two, I think you might agree with me that in our culture now, we're much more fond of telling than we are of listening. And if you have a whole lot of people telling, you end up with a world that looks like this and sounds like this. It's a noisy, unpleasant place with a lot of people shouting to try and be heard. And it's no surprise that people take refuge in these. Now, I've talked in another TED talk about the health effects of headphones. I don't want to cover that here. What I want to cover is the social effect of headphones, of this kind of personal stereo, because we take, and here's the big blue, social space like this, or like a train station, or like a train carriage, where we used to listen to each other to some degree, and we've turned it into this. Thousands and thousands, millions and millions of little personal sound bubbles. Nobody's listening to anybody in that situation. And there's an effect of that on society, I believe. There are some other aspects which are degrading our listening. First of all, we don't have any patience anymore. We don't want oratory. We want sound bites. We don't listen to albums anymore. We listen to tracks. We don't watch TV programs. We channel hop. Patience is very, very short in supply these days. And our media are shouting at us. Unless somebody really writes it big, outrage or shock, we're not bothered. And our listening is becoming desensitized and degraded. So it's very hard for us to hear the quiet, the subtle. Children are very happy if they've got 2 or even 3 sources of stimulus happening at the same time. One, they're bored. So there are several issues that are happening with our listening, and I do believe that we are in danger of losing our listening. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to live in a world where nobody's listening to anybody, because that way lies prejudice, judgment, violence, and even war. Listening is an antidote to all of those things. So this is important. So how do we get from that problem to a solution? Well, I'd like to give you some little exercises. This is like a gym for listening. I'm going to give you now some little exercises that you can take home with you, which will improve your listening no end. The first of those is this. It's rare to find silence in the modern world. Do try to find a few minutes every day. It's like a sorbet in a meal. It resets your ears, recalibrates you, and allows you to hear the quiet again. Just a few minutes of silence every day. Second is an exercise I call the mixer. Next time you're in a noisy cafe like this, try and isolate how many separate sounds, like channels on a mixing desk, you're listening to. How many people, how many different voices, how many baristas bashing on the counter. You can do it in lovely quiet environments like this as well. How many birds can I hear? How many individual ripples? Just really picture that mixing desk. It's a great exercise for becoming acute with your listening. The third one is savoring. Just like this guy is savoring his cup of coffee, we can savor lots of normal sounds, regular sounds, even boring, mundane sounds. Here's one I recorded just before I left. This is my tumble dryer at home. That's quite groovy. I mean, I could put a track on top of that. Or here's another one which I've recorded in quite high fidelity, and just listen to this simple kettle. Wow. There is richness in many sounds around us. This is about hearing the hidden choir, and you can do this all the time with sounds around you. The fourth exercise is listening positions. I'm going to give you 6 very quickly. I've positioned them as polar opposites. They're not really, and there are lots more that you could play with. First of all, there's active listening. This is used in the caring professions a great deal, and it's around the question, what I hear you say is, what you said is. It's reflecting back what somebody said, and it leaves them feeling heard. At the other end of that scale, passive listening. This would be a Zen master sitting by a stream. No intervention going on at all, just listening. Beautiful. Then we've got critical listening. This is what most of us do most of the time. Is that right or wrong? Do I agree with it? Do I disagree with it? Is it stupid? Is it wise? You've been doing that all day today as you assimilate TED input. And let me tell you, you have to give up at some point. It's not possible in a TED environment. At the other end of that scale, we've got empathetic listening. This is where you just be with that person. You go onto their island, you try and live their life, and let them feel not just heard, but understood. And then the last two, slight gender stereotype, and the research does back up that men and women listen in very different ways. So men tend to listen for a point. I call it reductive listening. So there's an objective in the conversation. Women, on the other hand, tend to enjoy the conversation, and it doesn't really matter where it goes, particularly, which results in a lot of conflict, because men get frustrated. Where are you going with this? And women feel cut off. You're not listening to me, which is the most common complaint in any relationship. Fifth and finally, I want to just give you an acronym to use in your listening to all of your relationships. I mean, you'll be one of these people. I'm sure this applies to all of us. The acronym is RASA, which is the Sanskrit word for juice. And it also means an expression of emotion in Indian theatre. And those letters stand for receive. So you go, oh, eye contact, appreciate, really, oh, really getting involved in the conversation. Summarize, the word so is very important here. So what you're saying is, so that means, and ask, oh, what happened after that? What are we going to do next? Rasa. It's very powerful. You'll be much better in your listening with that going on. Now that's the phenomenology of listening. I want to spend the last minute of my time talking about the ontology, the beingness of listening. I mean, what would it be to be listening? Not the listener, not the sound source, the bit in between. Think about this. Listening places you in space. You can hear this room. You can hear the micro sounds of the people around you. Even with your eyes shut, you know where you are. And even more importantly, listening places you in time, because all sound is in time. There is no such thing as a sound photograph. An instant of sound means nothing. Sound is really, as far as I'm concerned, how we experience time most keenly, the line of time, because of the sound going on around us. It's a flow. The French philosopher Jean-Luc Nancy says sonority is time and meaning. Hermann Hesse said, music is time made aesthetically perceptible. I would suggest, ladies and gentlemen, that listening is how we evoke the universe. And I'm a sound guy, I live to listen, but I'd like to suggest that we can all turn this around the other way and listen to live. Without listening fully, we're not living fully, we're not connected to the physical world, the metaphysical world, and most important of all, to each other. And we're not turning up that whole dimension in our experience of the world. So I just want to thank you for listening to me today.